He told his wife it was a mandatory tech conference, a week-long trip he couldn't get out of. He packed his suitcase, kissed her goodbye, and stepped into a taxi, his mind already on the luxury suite waiting for him. But the conference was a lie. The woman waiting for him at the airport wasn't a colleague. She was his mistress. They boarded the 18-story cruise ship, ready for a week of stolen passion. But they both froze in the grand ballroom when the ship's crew made an announcement, and the one person Marcus never expected to see walked down the stairs. "Please welcome your captain." The lie was a symphony of small, believable details. Marcus Vance had been practicing it for 6 weeks, ever since Chloe had pouted in her downtown apartment, swirling the ice in her cocktail. "A real vacation, Marcus," she'd said, her voice a low purr. "Not just a stolen weekend in a boring hotel. I want to see the ocean." So, Marcus built the lie. It was the SynTech Solutions Global Summit. It was in Miami. That part was true. But the summit itself was, he claimed, being held on a cruise ship, a corporate buyout of the Azure Empress. It was ridiculous, a week-long booze cruise for tech execs. But he had to go. "It's a huge networking opportunity, Elena," he'd said, rehearsing the lines in his head until they sounded like gospel. The morning of his departure, the lie felt solid, impenetrable. He stood in the sterile, grey and white kitchen of his suburban home, gulping down a lukewarm coffee. Across the granite island, his wife, Elena, was already in her own uniform. It wasn't a uniform, not really, but it was what he called it. Crisp black trousers, a simple, functional blouse, and her hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. She was scrolling through something on her tablet, her brow furrowed. At 42, Elena was still striking, but in a way that felt efficient, almost stark. She was all sharp angles and focused energy, a stark contrast to Chloe's curated, softened filter world. "You're sure you packed your motion sickness pills?" Elena asked, not looking up from her screen. "You always get queasy." "I'm fine, Elle. They're state-of-the-art stabilizers on this thing, apparently," Marcus said, straightening his tie. He felt a sharp, acidic pang of guilt, which he immediately washed down with more coffee. This was her fault, really. She was never present. Her mind was always somewhere else, on some navigational chart or duty roster. He'd met her when she was a junior officer, and he'd found her ambition thrilling. Now, 15 years later, her career as a high-ranking officer, first officer, he thought, was just a wall between them. Right. She finally looked up, her blue eyes clear and analytical. It was like being scanned. "Well, your flight is at 11:15. Traffic to the airport is already building." I know. He zipped his suitcase. "And you? You're off?" "New contract," she said, tapping her screen. "Short run. 2 weeks. I head out this afternoon." Good. It was perfect. The house would be empty. No one to call and check in. No loose ends. He walked over and kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled faintly of ozone and hairspray. "Be safe out there, okay?" "You too, Marcus," she said, her voice distant, her eyes already back on the tablet. "Have a successful conference." The cab ride to the airport was a slow shedding of his old skin. The guilt evaporated with every mile marker. By the time he passed through security, he was no longer Marcus Vance, the 44-year-old, mildly successful data analyst in a stagnant marriage. He was a man of mystery, a man on a vital business trip. Chloe was waiting for him at the gate, exactly as they'd planned. She was 28, a vision in a white linen jumpsuit, her blonde hair expertly tousled. She was holding up her phone, filming herself. "And my mystery man has arrived," she giggled, zooming in on him. "Put that away," he hissed, glancing around. But he was smiling. He kissed her, a long, public kiss that felt like a transgression and a triumph. She tasted like expensive lip gloss and mint. "Someone's tense," she teased, linking her arm through his. "Relax, baby. In 2 hours we'll be in Miami. And then, paradise." Paradise was the Azure Empress. It wasn't just a ship. It was a floating city, a monument to human indulgence. As their taxi pulled up to the terminal, Marcus felt a genuine, childish awe. He'd never seen anything so massive. Boarding was a breeze. They were in the VIP line, a perk of the King Suite he'd booked. They were handed champagne flutes as they stepped into the Grand Atrium, a 7-story marvel of glass, chrome, and sparkling lights. "Oh, Marcus," Chloe breathed, her eyes wide. It's perfect." Their suite was on the 15th deck. It was larger than their first apartment. It had a sprawling king-sized bed, a sitting area, a marble bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, and best of all, a private balcony with its own hot tub. "This is for us," he said, pulling her close as the ship's horn bellowed, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in his chest. He felt the subtle shift as the vessel began to move. He opened a complimentary bottle of champagne, the real stuff, not the cheap Prosecco from the terminal. He and Chloe toasted on their balcony, watching the skyline of Miami recede into a hazy, pastel sunset. "To the conference," Chloe said, a smirk playing on her lips. "To networking," Marcus replied, clinking his glass against hers. He felt powerful. He felt smart. He had flawlessly executed a complex plan. He had his beautiful, fun mistress in a palace at sea, and his cold, career-driven wife was, well, she was somewhere on a different, smaller, less important boat, probably charting a course to some dull cargo port. For the first time in a decade, Marcus Vance felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The first day at sea was a blur of decadent, guilt-free bliss. Marcus and Chloe woke late, tangled in high thread count sheets, the bright Caribbean sun pouring through the balcony doors. They ordered an absurd breakfast from room service, lobster eggs Benedict, pastries, fresh mango, and another bottle of champagne. "I could get used to this," Chloe murmured, feeding him a strawberry from the balcony hot tub. The deep blue of the open ocean stretched to every horizon, an endless, empty canvas. "Don't," he laughed. "We have to go back to the real world eventually." "Who says?" she said, kissing his shoulder. "Why can't this be the real world? We could just sail away. You could leave her. I know you want to." Marcus's smile tightened. This was the part of the script he didn't like. "Let's not talk about that, okay? Not here. This week is for us. No real world allowed." Chloe pouted for a second, then brightened. "Fine. But if this is our world needs cocktails, and that pool looks insane." They spent the afternoon at the adults-only solarium pool. Marcus, feeling expansive, bought a ludicrously expensive cabana. They drank piña coladas, the sugary rum warming his blood. He watched Chloe stretch out on a lounger, her body slick with designer sunscreen, and felt a swell of pride. He was the man who could provide this. He was the man she looked at with open, uncomplicated adoration. He compared her to Elena. Elena, who would have scoffed at the cabana as a frivolous expense. Elena, who would have been reading a dry, technical manual on maritime law instead of a trashy magazine. Elena, who hadn't looked at him with anything resembling desire in, how long? Years. The justification felt warm and comfortable, like the rum. He deserved this. He worked hard. He provided a good life, and if his wife was too busy climbing her little corporate ladder to pay attention to him, whose fault was it really? That evening, they dressed for the first formal night. Marcus in a new tuxedo, Chloe in a stunning, backless red dress that turned heads from the moment they stepped into the elevator. They had reservations at the specialty French restaurant, Le Miroir. The meal was a 7-course affair: foie gras, scallops, filet mignon. They talked and laughed, and Marcus felt every knot of tension from his real life, his deadlines, his mortgage, his loveless marriage, simply dissolve. "You know," Chloe said, tracing the rim of her wine glass, "you seem different here. Younger. Happier." "I am," he said, and he meant it. "It's the sea air." "It's me," she corrected, smiling. After dinner, they wandered through the ship. They went to the casino, where Marcus put 100 lows on black, and, to his astonishment, won. They watched a dazzling, fast-paced Broadway-style show in the main theatre. They danced at a salsa club, and Marcus, usually so reserved, felt loose and confident. They ended the night in a quiet piano bar, the Compass, nursing old fashions. "Tomorrow night is the big one," Chloe said, resting her head on his shoulder. "The captain's welcome gala. It says, 'Black tie required.' You think they'll kick us out if I wear this red dress again?" "They wouldn't dare," Marcus slurred, pleasantly drunk. "The captain's gala. Sounds official." "It's when you get to meet the captain. They do a whole welcome speech and a champagne toast for all the VIPs, Chloe said, reading from the ship's daily planner on her phone. "We're VIPs, right?" "We are," Marcus said, kissing her. "We definitely are." They walked back to their suite, arm in arm, under a sky so full of stars it looked fake. As they passed a wall of photographs showing the ship's senior officers, Marcus idly glanced at them. He saw the hotel director, Amelia Chen, the cruise director, a man with a painfully white smile, the chief engineer, and Staff Captain David Roberts. "Look at all these serious faces," Chloe giggled, pulling him away. "Come on, our hot tub is waiting." Marcus didn't see a photo of the ship's master, the captain. There was just a blank, silver plaque with the words, "Meet your captain," above it. He figured they must swap them out each voyage. He didn't give it another thought. He followed Chloe into the suite, closed the door, and locked the real world out for one more night. The Azure Empress was electric with anticipation. The captain's welcome gala was the pinnacle of the cruise's first leg, and the entire ship had been preparing. Marcus spent the late afternoon in the ship's thermal spa, while Chloe was at the salon. He sat in the steam room, the hot, eucalyptus-scented fog clearing his head. He felt rested, renewed. The lies and logistics that had been so stressful on land now seemed a distant, trivial concern. By 7 p.m. he was back in his tuxedo, a fresh white pocket square blooming from his breast pocket. When Chloe emerged from the bathroom, he actually whistled. She was wearing a floor-length, glittering emerald green gown. "Wow, Chloe, just wow. You'll put the captain to shame." "That's the plan," she laughed, taking his arm. "Let's go make our grand entrance." The Grand Atrium, which was already impressive, had been transformed. Strings of crystal hung from the ceiling, a live string quartet was playing on a mezzanine, and white-gloved waiters moved through the black tie-clad crowd with trays of champagne. Chloe was speechless. "This is like the movies." "Told you it was a good conference," Marcus said, winking. He took 2 glasses of champagne and handed one to her. They found a small table near the base of the grand, sweeping staircase, which was currently roped off. They mingled. They met a couple from Texas who owned a lot of oil, and a younger pair from California who had just sold their app. Marcus felt like he belonged. He was one of them. A high flyer, a man of substance. At 8 p.m., the music swelled, and a man in a crisp white uniform with a microphone stepped to a podium. Marcus recognized him from the photo wall. Staff Captain David Roberts. He was tall, with a strong jaw and serious, deep-set eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests," his voice boomed, rich and British accented, "on behalf of our entire crew, welcome aboard the Azure Empress. It is our distinct honor to be sailing with you." The crowd applauded politely. "And now," David continued, "it is my great privilege to introduce the master of this vessel, a navigator with over 20 years of experience, one of the finest maritime minds I have ever had the pleasure of serving under. Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for your captain." The rope at the top of the stairs was unclipped by 2 crew members. The string quartet launched into a triumphant, classical piece. Marcus was half-turned, whispering something to Chloe about getting another drink. "Wow," Chloe breathed, her eyes fixed on the top of the stairs. "A female captain. That is so badass." Marcus said, still not looking. "That's great, honey. Very modern." He turned, glass in hand, with a bored, indulgent smile on his face, and the glass slipped from his fingers. It didn't shatter. It hit the plush, deep pile carpet with a dull, wet thud, rolling to a stop. The champagne pooled around his rented shoes. Descending the staircase, one hand on the polished brass railing, was a woman. She was not in a flowing gown. She was in a stark, perfectly tailored white uniform. On her shoulders, 4 thick gold bars gleamed under the spotlights, signifying the highest possible rank. On her head was a white combination cover, which she held with practiced, formal grace. It was Eleanor. It was his wife. Marcus's blood didn't just run cold, it evaporated. His lungs locked. The entire glittering atrium, the music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, all rushed away from him, collapsing into a pinprick of roaring, silent panic. This was not possible. This was a nightmare, a stress dream. Eleanor was a first officer. She worked on different ships, smaller ships. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice, amplified by the ship's PA system, cut through the air. It was the same voice she used at home to discuss grocery lists, but now it was imbued with an authority he had never, ever heard. "I am Captain Elena Vance, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you aboard my ship." She reached the bottom of the staircase. Staff Captain Roberts handed her a microphone, and she looked out over the crowd. Her eyes, those same analytical blue eyes that had scanned him over her tablet just 48 hours ago, swept the room. They were professional, calm, warm even. And then they found him. They passed over him first, just a blur in the crowd. Then they snapped back. Her expression didn't change. There was no shock, no surprise, no flicker of recognition. Nothing. She just held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 agonizing seconds. And in that blank, professional stare, Marcus saw something far worse than anger. He saw confirmation. She knew. "I trust you are all settling in," Captain Elena Vance continued, her voice echoing in his skull, "and that my crew is making your journey as comfortable as possible. We have a wonderful week ahead of us as we make our way to Cozumel." "Marcus? Marcus, baby, what's wrong?" Chloe was tugging on his arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost. You're white as a sheet, and you dropped your drink. Marcus!" He couldn't speak. He could only stare at the woman on the podium, his wife, the captain, as she smiled benignly at the crowd. "Please," Captain Vance concluded, "raise your glasses with me. To fair winds, following seas, and a memorable voyage." The entire room raised their glasses. "To the captain!" someone shouted. "To the captain!" the room echoed. Marcus just stood there, drowning in the middle of the ocean, trapped on a floating city commanded by the one person in the universe he was quite sure he had just destroyed, and who, he was terrifyingly certain, was about to destroy him. The world tilted. Chloe's voice was a high-pitched, annoying buzz in his ear. "Marcus, are you sick? You're scaring me. Let's go back to the room." Yes. "Sick," Marcus managed to choke out. His limbs felt like they were filled with wet concrete. He grabbed Chloe's arm, not for support, but as an anchor, and began to push his way through the elegantly dressed crowd. "Excuse me, pardon me, sick, very sick." He didn't look back. He couldn't. He half-dragged Chloe to the nearest elevator, jabbing the up button with a trembling finger. "Was it the scallops?" Chloe asked, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "I told you they tasted a little. Just be quiet a second, Chloe. Please, I need to think." The elevator doors opened. He shoved them both inside and leaned against the mirrored wall, his reflection a ghastly, pale imitation of the suave man who had left the room 2 hours prior. The silence of their suite felt like a tomb. "Okay, what is going on?" Chloe demanded, her patience finally snapping. She ripped the train of her dress out of the door and crossed her arms. "Don't tell me you're sick. You saw that woman, the captain, and you completely fell apart. Who is she?" "She's no one," Marcus lied, his voice thin. He was pacing. Where could he go? He was on a ship, a 100,000-ton steel trap. He went to the balcony. The blackness of the ocean was absolute. There was no escape. "No one? No one doesn't make you drop your champagne and look like you're about to have a heart attack," Chloe spat. "Is she an ex? Did you wait? Oh my God, is that your—" "She's my wife, okay?" he roared, spinning around, his face contorted. "She's my wife." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Chloe's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally, a cold, hard fury. "Your wife?" she whispered. "The captain is your wife. You told me she was some pencil pusher, a first officer on a cargo ship." "I thought she was," he yelled, desperate. I had no idea. She was just promoted. This isn't my fault." "Not your fault?" Chloe shrieked. "You lied to me, Marcus. You lied about everything. We are on a ship for a week, captained by your wife. What kind of sick, twisted— What did you think was going to happen?" Before he could answer, there was a sharp, authoritative knock on the suite's door. They both froze. The knock came again. Rap, rap, rap. Not a friendly room service knock. This was a knock that meant business. Marcus, his heart hammering against his ribs, moved to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was not Elena. It was the tall, imposing figure of Staff Captain David Roberts, the man from the podium. He was flanked by 2 other crew members in security uniforms. Marcus opened the door, his hands shaking so badly he could barely turn the knob. "Mr. Vance?" David Roberts's British accent was cold, precise, and held zero warmth. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked only at Marcus. Yes. I am Staff Captain Roberts. The captain requests your presence, now." It was not a request. Can't it wait?" Marcus stammered. I'm not feeling well." Roberts's eyes flickered just once to Chloe, who was standing, mouth agape, in her emerald dress. "No, Mr. Vance, it cannot." He took a half-step forward, an unmistakable gesture. "Please, come with me." "Marcus, don't you dare go!" Chloe cried. Marcus looked at Chloe, then at the 3 uniformed officers. He had no choice. This was a mutiny he had already lost. I'll be right back," he said, stepping into the hallway. "Bring your key, sir," Roberts said quietly. "You won't be returning to this suite tonight." The world spun again. What? But my things are no longer your concern. Roberts turned. This way. The walk of shame was the longest 10 minutes of Marcus's life. They didn't take the public glass elevators. They were escorted through a crew-only door into the sterile, fluorescent-lit belly of the ship. They went up a narrow, steep staircase, past fire doors and junction boxes, the smell of paint and industrial cleaner replacing the faint, expensive perfume of the atrium. They emerged onto the 12th deck in a restricted hallway. Roberts swiped a keycard. A heavy metal door opened, and they were in the bridge wing, the ship's nerve center. Roberts led him to a large, unmarked wooden door and knocked. "Enter!" Elena's voice called from within. Roberts opened the door and gestured for Marcus to enter. "Mr. Vance, Captain." Marcus stepped inside. Roberts closed the door behind him, leaving him alone. The captain's quarters were not a bedroom. They were a vast, formal office. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the dark, churning bow of the ship. Another was covered in framed certificates and maritime maps. In the center was a massive, polished mahogany desk, and behind it sat Captain Elena Vance. She had removed her hat and jacket. She was in her crisp, white, short-sleeved shirt, the gold bars of her rank stark on her shoulders. She was typing on a laptop and she did not look up. "Sit," she said. Marcus collapsed into one of the two hard-backed chairs in front of her desk. He waited. The only sound was the clicking of keys and the faint, deep thrum of the ship's engines. Finally, she stopped typing. She folded her hands on the desk. She looked at him. "Elena," he began, his voice cracking. "Elena, I swear, I can explain." "No," she said. Her voice was flat. Dead. "You can't. And I don't want you to. I want you to listen." She leaned forward. "Let's clear up some of your confusion, Marcus. You seem to be under the impression that this is a surprise. That you've been caught. You haven't been caught. You've been summoned." Marcus's brow furrowed. What do you mean?" "I mean," Elena said, her eyes narrowing into chips of ice, "that I've known about her, about Chloe O'Neill, 28, works in marketing. For 6 months. His stomach dropped into his shoes. "How?" "You're a creature of habit, Marcus. You use the same secret credit card you opened 10 years ago. You think I don't see the statements? I hired a private investigator in March. I have photos. I have receipts from hotels. I have the entire, pathetic, cliché-ridden timeline of your affair." She held up a simple, printed piece of paper. "This is the passenger manifest for my maiden voyage as captain. I've been planning this voyage for a year. It's the most important moment of my career. And 3 weeks ago, whose name should I see pop up on the VIP list? Marcus Vance, booked into the King's suite with a +1. She smiled. It was the most terrifying expression he had ever seen. "You didn't know I was promoted to captain because you haven't really listened to a word I've said in 5 years. You thought I was first officer because it was comfortable for you. It kept me in a box you could manage. Well, I've been captain designate for this vessel for 6 months. She stood up, walking to the window, her back to him. "You thought you were a wolf, Marcus, a predator, sneaking off for a secret tryst. You're not. You're bait. I saw your name on the list and I did nothing. I let you walk right into the trap." "Elena." "Why?" he whispered, horrified. She turned back, her face a mask of cold, professional calm. "Because you were my problem, and I am a problem solver. On land, you had lawyers and friends, and a house you could hide in. On land, this would be a messy, drawn-out, pathetic divorce." She gestured to the room, the ship, the endless, dark ocean outside. But here, this is my world, my rules, my ship. You are 400 nautical miles from the nearest piece of land. You have violated the terms of your passenger status. And in my hand, I have a sworn affidavit from your mistress, who, by the way, is currently being relocated to a new cabin, detailing your deceit. As far as maritime and corporate law are concerned, you are the liability. Your conference has been cancelled, Marcus. Your +1 has been neutralized. And you are now my prisoner. Welcome aboard. Prisoner? Marcus scoffed, a desperate, hollow sound. That's ridiculous. I'm a paying passenger. I'll get off at the next port. I'll sue. Elena actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, mirthless bark. Sue? On what grounds? My wife, the captain, caught me cheating, and it was very embarrassing. She walked back to her desk and pressed a button on her intercom. David, please come in. The door opened instantly. Staff Captain Roberts entered, holding a tablet. Mr. Vance has raised the question of his passenger rights, Elena said to David, ignoring Marcus. Please update him on his status. David Roberts looked at Marcus with utter disdain. Mr. Vance, at 21:30 ship's time, your companion, Ms. Chloe O'Neill, was relocated from Suite 1501 to an interior stateroom on Deck 4, as per the captain's orders. Your own keycard for Suite 1501 has been deactivated. You can't do that. We can, and we have, Roberts said. Suite 1501 is now under a containment seal for a biohazard risk. A severe stomach virus is the official story, terribly contagious. This is insane, Marcus shouted, rising to his feet. You, Elena's voice cut through his panic, will be moved to a crew-grade cabin on Deck 3. It's clean, it's functional, and it's windowless. You will be in quarantine for the remainder of the voyage, for the safety of all passengers, of course. Quarantine? You can't. I am the captain of this vessel, Elena said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. My word is law. We are at sea. My primary duty is to the safety and security of 4,000 souls. You, Marcus, are a security risk. Your friend is volatile. Your combined presence is a disruption. I am containing that disruption. David? Roberts held up the tablet. This is a statement you will sign, acknowledging that you are voluntarily entering quarantine due to personal health reasons to avoid a wider panic. If you refuse to sign, I will have you confined to the brig for passenger misconduct and endangering the vessel. The brig? Marcus stared, dumbfounded. This isn't the 18th century. It's a secure holding room, Mr. Vance, Roberts said, his patience visibly gone. We use it for drunk and disorderly passengers. I assure you the crew cabin is preferable. Sign. He shoved the tablet and a stylus at Marcus. Defeated, his hands shaking, Marcus scrawled a meaningless signature. Excellent, Elena said. David, please escort Mr. Vance to his new quarters and ensure he is well stocked with soup and crackers. Aye, Captain, Roberts said. He jerked his head at Marcus. This way. Marcus was paraded back through the crew corridors, down, 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 into the bowels of the ship. His new cabin was tiny, perhaps 80 square feet. It had a narrow bunk bed, a tiny desk, and a bathroom so small he could touch both walls at once. It was clean, and it smelled of bleach. Roberts handed him a new, basic blue keycard. Do not leave this room, Mr. Vance. Meals will be brought to you. Your illness will be monitored. The heavy door clicked shut, and Marcus was alone. He sat on the narrow bed, the thrum of the engines louder here, a constant, vibrating reminder of his cage. He had no phone signal. The ship's intranet on the small wall-mounted TV required a passenger suite number to log in. His keycard gave him access to nothing. He was, in effect, a non-person. He spent 36 hours in that box. 3 times a day, a silent crew member would unlock the door, place a tray of simple, bland food, soup as promised, on the desk, and leave, locking the door behind them. Marcus cycled through a dizzying range of emotions. First, white-hot rage. How dared she? This was illegal. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Then, despair. He was trapped. He was at her mercy. He thought of Chloe, alone in her own small cabin. Was she okay? Then he felt anger at her. This was her fault. She'd pushed for this stupid trip. Finally, a creeping, cold dread settled in. He thought of Eleanor. The Eleanor on the staircase. The captain. He had never seen that woman before. The woman he'd married was quiet, reserved, almost mousy. The woman running this ship was a queen, a warrior, a strategist who had laid a perfect trap and watched him, the fool, walk right into it. On the 3rd day, there was a different knock. He opened the door. It was a crew member holding his tuxedo, cleaned and pressed. "The captain's table, sir," the man said. "Tonight, 8 p.m. You are to be her guest. An escort will be here at 7:45. The man left, leaving the tuxedo hanging on the back of the door. This was a new kind of torture. At 7:45 p.m., Staff Captain David Roberts, in his full dress whites, was at his door. "Mr. Vance, you look rested." "What is this, David? What's the game?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "It is the captain's table, Mr. Vance. A tradition. The captain dines with her most distinguished guests. Tonight, that includes an oil baron from Texas, a B-list movie star, and you." "She's parading me," Marcus whispered. "She is hosting," Roberts corrected. "This way." They walked out into the passenger areas for the first time in days. The lights, the music, the laughter. It felt like a different world. People looked at him, the man in the tux being escorted by the staff captain. He felt their stares like tiny pinpricks. In the center of the main dining room, on a raised dais, was a large, ornate table. Elena was already there, a vision in her formal, dark blue mess dress. She was laughing with the oil baron. She looked up as Marcus approached. Her smile was radiant. "Ah, Marcus, there you are," she called out, as if he were a beloved, slightly late relative. "Everyone, this is my husband, Marcus Vance. He's been so under the weather, poor thing. We've had him in quarantine. But he's feeling much better now, aren't you, dear?" She gestured to the empty seat, directly to her right. He sat. The entire table of 8 people turned to him. "Marcus, so glad you're contained," the movie starlet tittered, clearly having misunderstood quarantine. "Elena, your husband is so handsome," said the oil baron's wife. "What do you do, Marcus?" Marcus's mouth was dry. I'm in tech, data analysis." "Oh," the woman said, her interest evaporating. "How specific?" For the next 2 hours, Marcus sat in a hot, silent hell. He watched Elena charm every single person at that table. She told fascinating stories of navigating the high seas. She discussed complex geopolitics with the oil baron. She even gracefully deflected the movie star's inane questions. She was brilliant. She was funny. She was powerful. And every time she spoke, every time the table laughed, every time someone raised a glass to Captain Vance, she would give Marcus a tiny, private, knowing smile. She wasn't just the captain. She was the star, the sun, the center of this universe. And he was the man in the cheap-looking, though he knew it was expensive, tux, the +1, the husband. "My Marcus," she said, placing a hand on his, the first time she'd touched him in days. Her hand was cold. "He's always been my rock. While I've been off sailing the world, he's the one who keeps the home fires burning." don't you, darling?" He just nodded, a rictus grin frozen on his face. He had never, in his entire life, felt so small. The humiliation of the captain's table was only the beginning. For the next 2 days, Elena found new, inventive ways to torture him. He was released from his quarantine, but his new keycard only opened his tiny cabin on Deck 3. He was not allowed in any of the bars, the casino, or the specialty restaurants. He was, essentially, confined to the public access areas, the main Lido deck, filled with screaming children, and the buffet. Worse, he had a shadow. A junior security officer, a young, fit man named Michael, was assigned to him for his own well-being. Michael followed him everywhere, 6 paces behind, silent and watchful. Marcus was a pariah. He tried to find Chloe. He went to the interior cabins on Deck 4, but he didn't know her room number. He couldn't just knock on every door. He tried to ask a cabin steward, but the moment he gave his name, the steward's eyes glazed over. "I cannot help you, sir. Please speak to guest services." At guest services, the attendant would smile brightly, type his name into the computer, and the smile would freeze. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. There is a privacy flag on your account. I cannot access any information for you." He was in a digital prison as well as a physical one. He was on the Lido deck, nursing a cup of watery coffee, trying to ignore Michael, when he saw her. Chloe. She was standing by the railing, staring at the port of Cozumel, which they had just docked at. She looked terrible. Her blonde hair was stringy, her eyes were red and puffy, and she was wearing the same sundress she'd had on 3 days ago. "Chloe!" he called, starting to run toward her. Michael, his shadow, was suddenly in front of him. "Mr. Vance, I would advise against—" "Get out of my way!" Marcus shoved him. The security officer stumbled, surprised. Marcus ran to Chloe. "Chloe, thank God, are you okay? What did they do to—" She turned to him, and her face was not one of relief. It was pure, unadulterated venom. "You!" she hissed. Her voice was a rasp. "You bastard!" She slapped him. It wasn't a movie slap. It was a hard, open-palmed, vicious strike that cracked across the deck and snapped his head to the side. The entire pool deck went silent. "You ruined everything!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "They have me in a closet, with no window. They took my passport. They said I'd get it back when we disembark." "Chloe, I didn't know." "You knew. You must have known. This was some sick game, wasn't it? Get your wife and your mistress on the same boat. Did you get off on it, you pig?" She lunged at him, fingernails bared. Michael and another security officer were on her in a second, grabbing her arms. "Let go of me!" she shrieked, struggling. "Miss O'Neill, you are causing a disturbance," Michael said, his voice firm. "Please return to your stateroom." "He's the one. He's the liar. He's the one you should be grabbing." As they dragged her, thrashing and screaming, toward the elevator, she locked eyes with Marcus. "I will ruin you, Marcus. I will tell everyone. I'll go to the news. I'll—" The elevator doors slid shut. Marcus stood there, his cheek burning, the eyes of 100 passengers on him. He turned and walked away, Michael trailing behind him like the world's most diligent reaper. He fled to his cabin, but his humiliation was interrupted by a new, more primal sensation. The ship, which had been rock solid for days, was moving, lurching. A deep vibration ran through the hull, far stronger than the usual engine thrum. Then an announcement crackled over the ship's PA system, not Elena's voice, but David Roberts's. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the staff captain. Due to an unexpected and rapidly developing tropical storm, our shore time in Cozumel has been cut short. We are now departing the port. We ask that all passengers return to their staterooms and secure all balcony items. We are expecting a rough transit for the next 12 to 24 hours. Please stay off the open decks. Thank you." Marcus sat on his bunk. The ship was moving, and not in a smooth, gentle way. It was slamming, a heavy, shuddering impact, followed by a long, sickening roll. The lights in his cabin flickered, went out, then came back on, dimmer, the emergency lighting. Another announcement. This time it was Eleanor, and the warm, charming hostess from the captain's table was gone. This was the voice of a commander. "All passengers, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a severe, unforecasted weather system. We are in no immediate danger, but this will be an uncomfortable ride. All crew to level 1 storm stations. All non-essential passenger services are now closed. Stay in your cabins. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to call the bridge or guest services. We will update you when we can. Vance, out." The ship heaved, and Marcus was thrown from his bunk onto the floor. This was real. For hours he was tossed around his tiny, windowless box like a die in a cup. The noises were terrifying. A high-pitched shriek of wind he could hear even on deck 3, and a deep, groaning, metallic sound, as if the ship itself were in pain. He was no sailor, but he knew this was bad. He thought of Eleanor. Where was she? The bridge. He pictured her, strapped to a chair, fighting a giant wheel like in the movies. No, that was stupid. It was all computers. But she was the one in charge. She was the one responsible for 4,000 lives, responsible for his life. The irony was acidic. He, the man who had lied and cheated, was now wholly dependent for his survival on the woman he had betrayed. The ship took a massive, shuddering dive. He heard, even over the storm, a distant sound of crashing glass and a faint scream. We are in no immediate danger. She was lying, just like he had. But her lie was to protect people. His was to get a tan. An hour later, the ship's PA crackled again. It wasn't Elena. It was David Roberts, and his voice was strained, breathless. "This is an urgent message. All passengers. We have a medical emergency in the Compass piano bar. We have a compromised bulkhead. All passengers on deck 7, aft, move to the central atrium. We need all able-bodied crew to deck 7. The voice cut out. A compromised bulkhead. Marcus didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. He was terrified, but beneath the terror was a new, strange feeling. He couldn't just sit here. He opened his cabin door. The hallway was chaos. Crew members were running, some carrying medical bags, others with tools. Alarms were blaring. "Sir, get back in your cabin," a crewman shouted at him. I can help," Marcus yelled over the din. I'm with the captain." The crewman didn't have time to argue. He just ran. Marcus ran, too. He ran against the flow of crew, heading for the central staircase. He didn't know what he was doing. He just knew he couldn't die in that box. He fought his way up the stairs, the ship lurching violently. He saw the Compass bar on deck 7. It was gone. The outer wall of the bar, the one made of thick glass, had been shattered by what must have been a rogue wave. Water was everywhere. Furniture was tossed about. And cowering behind an overturned piano was Chloe. She was soaked, bleeding from a cut on her forehead and shrieking in pure animal terror. "Help! Somebody help me!" A piece of debris, part of the ceiling, tore loose and crashed down, blocking the main exit. She was trapped. Marcus looked at her. He looked at the water sloshing around his ankles. He could run. He could go back to his cabin. He thought of Eleanor on the bridge, fighting this monster of a storm. He thought of her in that office, a general laying out a battle plan. He took a deep breath, the salt and the rain stinging his face, and he waded through the water toward Chloe. "It's okay," he shouted. "I'm here. I've got you." Marcus, she sobbed. We have to climb, over the piano. Now! He grabbed her, slung her arm over his shoulder, and began to haul her, half carrying, half dragging, over the wreckage, just as another wave smashed into the crippled bar. They were the last two out. As Marcus pushed Chloe over the ruined piano and into the arms of two crew members, the ship gave a final, agonizing lurch, and the entire lighting rig from the bar's small stage collapsed onto the spot where they had been cowering. "Move! Move! Get them to the triage center in the atrium!" a crewman with a radio yelled. Marcus, his heart pounding a hole in his chest, his hands bleeding from glass shards, let them lead him away. He was just another face in the crowd of pale, terrified passengers being herded by the hyper-efficient, calm under-pressure crew. He saw Chloe being led away, wrapped in a shock blanket. She didn't look back. The rest of the night was a blur. The ship, though wounded, was stable. The storm, as if it had spent its fury, began to recede. By dawn, the Azure Empress was limping, but upright, in a calm, grey sea. An announcement came, around 6 a.m. It was Eleanor. Her voice was exhausted, raw, but absolutely in command. "This is the captain. The storm has passed. We have sustained damage, but the ship is secure. I repeat, the ship is secure. Our engineering and medical teams are performing magnificently. We will be diverting to the nearest port, which is Miami. We are cancelling the remainder of the cruise and returning home. We expect to be docked in 24 hours. Thank you for your courage. Vanti, out." They were going home. Marcus was taken to the infirmary, his hands were bandaged, and he was returned to his Deck 3 cabin. This time he was too exhausted to feel angry. He slept. When he woke, the ship was silent. The constant thrum of the engines was gone. He looked at the small TV. The ship's camera feed showed the familiar skyline of Miami. They were docked. An hour later, the knock came. It was Staff Captain David Roberts. His white uniform was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes, but he stood as tall as ever. "Mr. Vance, the captain will see you." This time the walk was different. The ship was quiet. Passengers carrying bags were already disembarking, their faces a mixture of relief and annoyance. They didn't go to the bridge. They went back to Suite 1501. The biohazard seal was gone. The door was open. Elena was inside, but not in uniform. She was wearing her land clothes, black trousers and a simple grey sweater. Her hair was down. She was packing a small duffel bag. The rest of the suite was pristine, as if he and Chloe had never been there. "David, thank you," she said to Roberts. "That will be all. I'll see you at the debrief." "Captain?" He nodded, and with one final withering look at Marcus, he left and closed the door. Silence. "So," Marcus said, his voice rusty, "you saved the ship." "We saved the ship," Elena corrected, not looking at him. She zipped her bag. "The crew did. The stabilizers held. Barely. I was there, in the compass bar. I got Chloe out." "I know," she said. "I saw the security footage. It was competent." "Competent," he repeated. "You're not a hero, Marcus. You're just a man who finally, after 44 years, did one single unselfish thing in a moment of panic. Don't confuse it with character." She turned to face him. Her eyes were so tired. "The lawyers have been notified," she said, her voice all business. "The divorce papers will be served at the house. I've already filed. Irreconcilable differences. It's clean. Elena, our joint accounts will be frozen by noon. My attorney, a very expensive man named Mr. Albright, has a full copy of the private investigator's report, as well as signed affidavits from 3 crew members, including Staff Captain Roberts and Ms. O'Neill." At the mention of her name, Marcus flinched. "Chloe, What? Ms. O'Neill was very cooperative. In exchange for not being sued for the damages to her first stateroom, which she apparently destroyed, and a full refund, she has agreed to be a witness. She was disembarked with a non-disclosure agreement and a one-way ticket back to Chicago. You won't be hearing from her again. You thought of everything. It's my job, she said, to see the dangers ahead, to navigate around them, and if I can't navigate around them, to blast them out of the water. She picked up her bag. You were the danger, Marcus. The storm, that was just weather. But you were the iceberg, the one I should have seen coming 10 years ago. What now? He asked, feeling smaller than he had even at the captain's table. Now I go to a hotel. I sleep for 24 hours. Then I have a 3-day debrief with the board of directors. Then I get my next command, a bigger ship. She walked to the door. Elena, wait, he pleaded. I'm sorry, I really am. I saw you. At that dinner, during the storm. I saw you, the woman you are. And you're incredible. She stopped, her hand on the handle. She looked back, not with anger, not with hate, but with a kind of clinical pity. That's the tragedy of it, Marcus, she said softly. You did see me, but you could only see me when I was 18 stories tall and in charge of 4,000 lives. You couldn't see me when I was just your wife, sitting across the breakfast table, asking you to pass the salt. She opened the door. Goodbye, Marcus. The house is yours. For now. I'd advise finding a very good lawyer. Mr. Albright is thorough. And with that, Captain Elena Vance walked out of the suite, down the hallway, and out of his life. Marcus stood alone in the opulent empty room. He walked to the balcony. Below him, the Azure Empress was a hive of activity. Crew, port authority, news vans. He looked out at the port, the city, his home. He had lied, cheated, and betrayed. And in return, his wife hadn't just left him. She hadn't just divorced him. She had captained him, contained him, and in the ultimate final act of authority, she had disembarked him. He was no longer a passenger. He was just cargo, left on the dock, with nothing but the bill. The worst betrayals don't just happen. They are built, day by day, on a foundation of small lies and quiet dismissals. Marcus thought he was in control, but he was just a passenger in a story his wife was commanding. What do you think of Eleanor's actions? Was her revenge a cold, calculated masterpiece, or did she go too far? This is the kind of story that reminds us to never, ever underestimate the person sitting across from us at the breakfast table. They might just be a captain waiting for their ship. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you were on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you have a story of your own, or a thought about this one, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And of course, if you want more stories of drama, twists, and real-life karma, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell.